back, everyone. Today we're going to be discussing the free scenario, the Derelict. It's available on Chaosium's website for free. It was their free RPG Day scenario several years ago. I have a physical copy. You can print physical copies pretty much just at cost from lulu.com. I think this cost me about $10 Canadian plus shipping. I will include a link in the video description if you're someone who likes having a physical copy. But if you're fine with PDF, the scenario will be completely free for you, and it's worth checking out for pretty much any group. What this scenario is, thematically, is a fun mix of Norse mythology, Norse legend, and the kind of themes you're going to get from a horror movie like Ridley Scott's Alien. Those kind of themes of isolation and being hunted in a confined space. The scenario is really fun. My group had a blast with this. And basically, what it is a group of socialites, relatively wealthy people, and their friends are on a luxury yacht. The scenario is set ostensibly in the 2008-2009 period, and one of the player characters is the owner of the yacht, and due to the recession, they're going from the US to Liverpool in the United Kingdom to sell their yacht because they can no longer afford it. It's one final outing for this group of friends, and on the way there in the North Atlantic, they come across a shipping vessel that has run aground on an iceberg, it would appear. They know that the laws of salvage would entitle them, if they assist the crew and the vessel, the player characters would be entitled to a share of the goods on that vessel, and that could really change some of the player characters' fortunes. So they have a nice incentive to investigate it. When they get aboard this vessel, the Grönland Tropsch, they quickly find that the crew is nowhere to be seen, and something appears to be very wrong. If you're interested in playing this scenario, there will be spoilers from here on out. So if this sounds like something that you would enjoy playing, just send your keeper this way. And if you're a keeper, do keep watching, because I will run through the plot of the scenario and offer you my thoughts on things you can do and things that I thought worked well when I ran it. Alright, I'm going to begin by discussing the plot because it's pretty threadbare in this one, and really it's more about the atmosphere you create as your players explore the Grönland Tropsch. The scenario is set in modern day. I think in general it's going to work better in modern day, and certainly if you wish to use the pre-generated characters, which I will discuss shortly, it's going to work much better as a modern day scenario because that's what their backgrounds assume. If you wanted to set this as part of your ongoing campaign in the 20s, if that's the era that you like to play in, I think you could. It would take a bit of work. There are some recommendations included for doing so, such as setting it kind of in and around 1929 or later. Again, if your players are playing wealthy characters, the Great Depression may force them to sell their yacht, so they would be making the same voyage. And then, of course, there was transatlantic shipping in that period as well. So it could work, but everything is written assumes it's a modern scenario, and you're going to need to make some modifications if you want to move it. But I think it is possible with a little bit of work. The scenario plot is basically that the owner of the yacht has heard from his mother in the UK that at this particular area of the North Atlantic, there may be a shipping vessel that has run aground on an iceberg, and there may be an opportunity for salvage. So he discreetly asks the non-player character crew of his ship, it's a two-man crew, basically a captain and a first mate, to discreetly make a little detour from their direct route from, I believe it's Boston to Liverpool. And that all happens before play begins. So if you have a player playing as the owner of the yacht, which you may want to do, depending on the size of your group and the tendencies of your players, and if you know someone is going to enjoy having this little secret, that could be a fun thing to do. That's all going to happen before play. If you have a player playing that character, you may just want to talk to them briefly before play begins and fill them in on this knowledge that they would have and that they have actually already directed the ship this way discreetly before play begins. Play begins with the characters basically just partying in the middle of the day on the yacht. They're roughly halfway, if not more, through their voyage to Liverpool. And the provided pre-generated characters are generally people who enjoy partying for the most part. So this offers a nice way, if you're playing this as a one-shot, for people to introduce their characters to each other, for you to see what kind of tendencies some of the characters might have, aspects of their personality. And then whenever you feel that that is sufficiently played out, you can have them spot the run-aground Grönland Tropsch in the distance. At that point, certainly the owner of the yacht is going to want to investigate, but you can also just tell your players the scenario assumes that they would know that the law of the sea entitles them to salvage rights on this ship if they render assistance to it, and that could mean a lucrative payday for them, depending what the ship is carrying. Your players will probably buy in because this is obviously the premise of the scenario, and that's going to get them on to the Grönland Tropsch. From there, no one's around. The crew is all dead. They do not know that. And if they make a spot hidden roll, they're going to find a severed hand that looks like it's been bitten off, kind of adjacent to a crane on the deck of the ship, some distance from where they're going to get on aboard, which is why it requires a spot hidden roll. From there, there's really two locations that they can investigate. They can go down into the cargo hold and look around down there, or they can go into the superstructure of the ship and look around basically in the areas where the crew generally lived and worked. If you're running this as a one-shot, you're probably only going to be able to have time to send your group to one of these locations. I think fully exploring the ship is going to take more time than most 3 to 4 hour sessions of one-shot play would allow for. So what I did is I sent my players to the superstructure. I was playing the owner of the yacht as an NPC, and he took one of the other NPCs to go look around in the hold, while he sent another NPC along with the two player characters I had onto the superstructure. The reason I did that is the creature that has killed the crew, the Ceopod, is basically sleeping in the hold. If you send your characters down into the hold, they're going to poke around. They're going to find the cargo of the ship, very mundane. And they're not actually going to find the creature that quickly because it's invisible. They may notice things have moved since they last saw them. So, for instance, if the creature was sleeping under a tarp, as the scenario suggests, they're going to find that suddenly a tarp that was covering some goods that previously looked to have substance is now flat, and the goods have mysteriously moved of their own accord. Of course, if they just happen to lift up the right tarp and find the Ceopod, you can have them make sanity rolls for there being nothing there, despite the impression that something is under the tarp, and then it's going to wake up and start killing them. If you want to play the scenario really quickly, that could be the route you want to take. But I think it's going to be less satisfying because there's not much you can find in the way of clues. You're just going to find the slaughtered bodies of the crew that the monster is keeping basically in the freezer area of the hold and gradually eating, and then potentially the monster itself. If, on the other hand, you direct your players in the direction of the superstructure, the scenario is going to play out a lot better, I think, because they're not immediately going to be attacked by the Ceopod. The Ceopod is going to be able to kill whatever NPCs you send to the hold. So the fact these people are missing when the characters go to rendezvous with them is going to increase the atmosphere and the sense that something is wrong without ever having shown them the monster or shown them what it has done. You're also, after using the monster to just kill the NPCs that you sent to the hold, it's going to be able to go onto their luxury yacht, kill the two crew members there, and basically destroy the engine and the steering, as well as the radio on the yacht. So basically, completely stranding the characters and preventing them from just saying, "This is really scary, let's leave," and just short circuiting the scenario in that way. So you're creating a much better setup. But the other advantage of the superstructure is that there is more in the way of clues there, and I think there's also more in the way of atmosphere. You can see that doors have been basically caved in from some like amazing force. You can see the remains of like barricades that the crew was attempting to set up, Molotov cocktails that they were attempting to make. It's very obvious something very bad happened here, and something was attacking the crew that appears to have the strength far beyond what a human would have. There are also clues as to what the creature is in the superstructure. Not only is there a captain's log detailing what the basic journey of the ship was and how it came to run aground, but more importantly, one of the crew members has a book on Norse mythology, basically marked at the page where there is an entry on the Ceopod, and it's the story of, I believe it's Eric the Red's saga, and basically some Vikings 1,000 years or more ago encountered the Ceopod on one of their journeys, or a Ceopod rather. There may be more than one of these things, and they basically just detailed what it was, that it was no good, it killed one of their friends, and then it ran away before they could do anything about it. That's going to give the players a hint of what might have killed the crew and what might still be on the ship. And it's nice to provide your players with that if they're kind of into the investigation, which a lot of Call of Cthulhu players are. The final thing that they can find in the superstructure that's going to be really helpful to them is, I believe in one of the cabins, I believe the chief engineer's cabin, they can find suggestions that the crew was planning on using the cranes to fight the Ceopod. And that can clue them in to one of the ways in which they could try to combat this creature by luring it to the cranes and then using the heavy machinery to basically smash it or knock it overboard or trap it in the hold or what have you. There are a few other ways you can fight it. As they go through the superstructure, if they are exploring thoroughly, they're also going to find the storage area for the compressed air canisters. That's something, if they can unlock the door to get to them, that's something they can potentially employ against the Ceopod. And then in some of the cabins, I believe higher up in the superstructure, they can find things like flares, or I believe the captain has a silver pen. And characters who are in contact with silver are able to see the Ceopod. Characters that are not in contact with silver are not. The creature is invisible to them. So not only are you going to be able to ensure that if they explore thoroughly, at least some of your players are going to be able to see this thing that is eventually going to start hunting them, but you can also create fun atmosphere by having one of your characters, see a shape move briefly down the hall before disappearing into another room, but the two other characters with them who are also looking that way and who were not holding silver at the moment or who didn't have a silver watch or something like that didn't see anything. And that can be fun to create atmosphere, suspense, even potentially distrust between your player characters. Finally, I like the superstructure because it offers the player characters a way to escape. There's an exterior staircase down a lot of the superstructure, but there's also an interior staircase in the center of it. That means, given that there's one Ceopod, even if the characters are being chased and they don't know what is chasing them, as long as they can hear it behind them, they will have a way out and they will not be trapped, and they will probably not be TPK'd unless they stick around and try to fight the invisible thing, which is probably a bad idea. Now, if you have a bigger group where you have 5 plus players, it's very probable that they'll want to thoroughly explore the ship. If you're fine with the session extending beyond 3 hours, have at it. You can also just quickly kill the players who go to the hold, and then really quickly start hunting the characters who go to the superstructure. You might be able to keep it within a 3-4 hour session that way by really ramping up the pressure quickly, but it might not be as satisfying to the player characters who end up going in the hole and get killed early on. So if you're playing with more characters and you want to give everyone an opportunity to explore everywhere in the ship and not just kill off some of your players quickly before they can really start having fun with the scenario, I would plan for this one to take more than one session. Because I ran it with a smaller group, I forced them into the superstructure, and then I kept the pace up. I kind of indicated when they had thoroughly searched a room and there wasn't much more to find. I was able to keep the pace of play pretty good, and I believe we finished this in about 3.5 hours. So it's doable. But they never really saw the hold or what was going on down there. So there was a section of the ship they didn't explore. Let's talk about the pre-generated characters. The scenario includes some really fun ones. I really like that they are included. So if you just want to try a game of Call of Cthulhu out for free and you have the quick start, or even if you have the starter set, you're going to be able to hand out the pre-generated characters, and people are going to get going in the game right away, and they are hopefully going to have fun. I'll show you some of them. And a lot of them are quite fun. So here you have kind of the ditzy actress. She loves to party. You can see that they have well-defined relationships with every other possible player character. They have a fun backstory. Some of these backstories you could actually build from to homebrew a campaign if the characters survive, which is a really nice inclusion. A lot of work went into these pre-generated characters, and they're really well done, and they're quite fun. Here you have the yacht owner. He's a writer by trade. He's kind of dark, brooding. Again, you can see he has a well-developed backstory and well-developed relationships with the other player characters. Here you have a cop. He's been known to tangle with the mob, and he likes to tell people all about it. Again, really nicely developed character. Dennis McCrane is one of the funnest characters. He's really a paranoid kind of security contractor. If you have a player who can roll with that, he can be a lot of fun, just with his paranoia, especially as the atmosphere of the scenario gives him cause to be paranoid. And finally, second last, we've got Elizabeth Hill, and Dennis McCrane is actually responsible for escorting her back to her family in the UK. She's basically just been a dilettante, kind of partying, living it up in the United States, and her parents have had enough. She doesn't want to be there. And what I did with Liz to give my players a backup character if one of their characters got killed over the course of the scenario, which did happen, is it's very likely that Dennis is going to not want her to go on this sketchy ship because it's his job to keep her safe. He's a paranoid guy. So if one of your players doesn't really want to play Liz, you can basically just lock her in her cabin on the luxury yacht. And then when the Ceopod goes onto the yacht and kills the crew, it's not going to know she's there, or you can just make it so it's not able to bust down her door and get to her. And that way you've got a nice backup character for your players if they don't get TPK'd. but one of them dies, you can hand them Liz and they can keep having fun in the scenario with everyone else. That's an option that worked really well for me. But if someone wants to play Liz, hand her over for sure. It's better that people play a character that they want to play. Finally, you've got the professional athlete. And again, you can see he has a fun backstory and well-established relationships with others. Of course, you could play this, as I alluded to at the beginning, with characters from your own campaign. It's a condition that to make the scenario possible to play, they either have to, one of them has to be very wealthy and own a yacht, or you have to introduce an NPC at an earlier point in the campaign who is their friend, who you can get them on this person's yacht without it being suspicious and them thinking this is, something is wrong immediately and they're all on edge. And you probably have to be okay with this NPC getting killed over the course of the scenario, because that's probably going to happen. There's not really an easy source of escape. There's not, and on top of that, both the player characters and the non-player characters in the scenario are being hunted by an invisible hunter who has basically a giant bow and arrow with a harpoon and can pick them off at a distance. So I would caution against making this wealthy friend a character like Jackson Elias or someone like that if you're planning if you're planning on using that wealthy non-player character later, they might not be someone that you want to seed into the scenario as the wealthy friend who owns the yacht. I didn't integrate this into my game. I'm not running a modern game. We, as a group, ran this just as a fun Halloween one-shot. It worked really well. The pre-gens were fun. People had fun dying because it was just pre-gens and it's characters that they're not as attached to, and they're willing to kind of take riskier decisions or go along with the atmosphere of the game more. And I thought it was a really good option for that. But if you really like the scenario, really want to slot it into your campaign, it's just something to think about how you're going to introduce a rich NPC that you're not going to need to use in future scenarios, or you're going to need to make one of your characters create a character who's quite wealthy and owns a yacht. So the handouts in this are of pretty good quality. I really like the layouts of the ship. There's the luxury yacht that the players start on. It's nicely drawn up. And here is the Grönland Tropsch, where they're going to spend most of their time. I really like this layout quite a lot because there's not spoilers on it, so far as I can recall. There are not, important locations marked. Pretty much every room is marked, so it's not immediately going to be clear, this 2 locations are marked in this giant thing, that's where we need to go. And I also don't think it's marked where the monster begins, so that's really nice. You can approach this by not handing this over to them and just using it to describe what your players are seeing and allowing them to have that sense of exploring the vessel. Or if it's a group who likes to look at blueprints and maps, you can just hand it over. There's not spoilers on it, and they can basically figure out where they want to go. So that is nice. There's not much else in the way of handouts in here, apart from the clue that is the basically Book of Norse Mythology, and it has an entry in Norse, and it has basically a translation in English, and the premise is that it's a book that is an English translation that includes original text. That's fun. It's a nice touch. There's not much else though, so if your players like a handout heavy game, they might be a little disappointed with this one. There is not a handout provided for the ship's log, and in all honesty, it's probably something your players aren't going to be able to interact with. It's written in Norwegian, and that is because the crew was predominantly Scandinavian, and that was the language that the captain was most familiar with. It was his native language, and that's how he was writing his log. I'm fine with this, and if you're slotting this into an ongoing campaign and your player characters probably don't have language Norwegian, it makes perfect sense. They've gotten onto a Norwegian vessel. They're probably American characters. They're not able to read it. It makes sense. I am a little bit disappointed that not a single pre-generated character in here has any language Norwegian. So there is basically a description of what happened on the vessel prior to the obvious manifestation of the Ceopod and the deaths of the crew. And it's just something that probably in 95% of games and 100% of games that you're using the pre-generated characters in, your players are going to find this and not be able to interact with it. And to me, it's a little disappointing that this fun piece of information that can contribute to building the theme of the scenario is included, and then not a single pre-gen is offered who can interact with this and share this story with your other characters. I didn't end up making modifications to the pre-gens. If I ran this again, I would just give one of the player characters a modicum of skill in Norwegian, so maybe 20 points or something thereabouts, and then they can read it. They're not going to fully understand it with that level of language skill, so then you're going to be able to add their partial understanding of kind of the account of the growing paranoia of the ship's crew, and that could be really fun, especially they're not understanding key points of the entries. You could have a lot of fun with that. So that's what I would do if I was running this again. If you're running it with characters in an ongoing campaign, I would be less worried about giving them Norwegian. But I am disappointed for the purposes of a one-shot. They're not able to interact with that handout. So really, only two big clues that can be found relating to what happened. Only one of them has a handout. But this wasn't really a problem for my group. My group loves handouts, but my group also loves atmospheric horror, and they had a lot of fun with what the scenario offered in that regard. So don't be deterred by the smaller number of handouts than maybe is average for a Call of Cthulhu scenario. The atmosphere in this is excellent, and most groups are going to have a lot of fun with it. In terms of how experienced you need to be to run this scenario, I don't think this is the first scenario you want to run, but at the same time, it's not too hard. There are no NPCs alive on the Groenland Tropsch when the scenario starts. All you have to keep track of is the Ceopod and what it's doing. What it's doing is generally hunting and killing characters, so it's not a particularly complex villain to be managing. There are for sure two non-player characters on the Delilah, the luxury yacht. Those are the crew members who stay behind on it when the characters go to investigate the Groenland Tropsch. Apart from very basic interactions in the first maybe 15 minutes of the scenario with the player characters, these are characters who are very quickly going to get killed off by the Ceopod in most games. So again, it's eliminating non-player characters that you have to keep track of, manage, and roleplay. Depending on how many players are in your group, you may have to manage some non-player character pre-generated characters. So of the ones included, if you only have 2 or 3 players, there's going to be a few left over. While you might be tempted to just cut them and say there was actually only 3 people on the ship, I would recommend using them to send them to the hold. You're going to build atmosphere that way, and you're also going to quickly eliminate them and give yourself less to keep track of. But again, your players aren't necessarily going to know that, and they might end up wandering into the hold or looking around searching for these people who have been killed. So I would just keep them around. They're not going to be that hard to manage. They're probably going to die quickly again. The Ceopod hunting the characters is a little bit trickier to manage for someone who's less experienced. The scenario is great in terms of giving you quite detailed descriptions of what pretty much every room in the superstructure looks like. It's a little more vague in the cargo hold, but the cargo hold is a pretty basic location that most people are going to be able to describe with what the scenario offers you. The bigger problem is the scenario basically just says that the Ceopod is going to hunt the player characters, and it leaves it to the keeper to determine what that looks like. The assumption is that most keepers are gonna, understand their group. They're gonna understand what scares their group. They're gonna understand what kind of things their group has fun with, and they're gonna use the Ceopod in those ways. So if the group really loves like pulpy action, they're just gonna give some of their characters silver items to start with, and the Ceopod's gonna be hunting them in the halls, and there's gonna be a lot of fighting. If the group likes more atmospheric horror in the vein of Alien, they're going to be hunted by a creature that they can't see. They're going to maybe be gradually getting picked off if they're splitting up. So there's a lot of trust placed in the keeper. If this is your first time running a game, it could be hard to manage it because you're not being explicitly told step by step, 15 minutes into the scenario, the Ceopod will be here. So it's a little trickier. It requires more improvisation. That said, if you've run one or two scenarios and you've basically built up confidence in managing the system, managing some non-player characters, this isn't too hard. The Ceopod just wants to hunt them. It's invisible. And basically your goal is to use it to build atmosphere and then eventually start picking people off. If you're running this in the Alien rather than Aliens vein of kind of horror. So I would certainly recommend this to most groups. Again, if you're running your first ever game of Call of Cthulhu, put this a little further down your list. Run one or two games before this, and then I think you'll be ready to run this one. For more experienced keepers, this scenario basically provides you an excellent framework to use the Ceopod to have fun with. Finally, on the silver aspect, I believe what the scenario suggests is your players make a luck roll at the beginning of the scenario to determine if they have a silver item on them. I was fine with this. My players rolled poorly and didn't have a silver item on them, so they were not able to see the Ceopod as it was following them for about the first half of the scenario, but they knew something was wrong, and they obviously knew something had killed the crew as they began to explore more of the superstructure. They then were able to find that silver pen in the captain's quarters, and because they didn't know silver is like the MacGuffin of the scenario, they just pocketed it. The Ceopod then attacked them, and I had them make a luck roll, and I had the silver pen fall out of one of their pockets as they were getting attacked, and I just said their character instinctively grabbed it as it fell on the ground. So that was the consequence of making the luck roll. And once they were able to see this thing and realized that making their luck roll had made them pick up this silver thing, now they could see what was going on, they immediately figured out silver had something to do with being able to see it. So even if your characters roll badly at the start, don't worry, there's ways that the scenario offers and that you can improvise as a keeper to ensure that they can see the thing when it matters, or at least some of them can. But if you don't like that idea, you can just give a few of them silver items at the start and just forego the luck rolls. It's really up to you. I liked the luck rolls, but your mileage may vary on that. To conclude, the Derelict is my favorite scenario of the 3 full-length scenarios that are made freely available on Chaosium's website. The other 2 are Scritch Scratch and Lightless Beacon. I've reviewed Scritch Scratch. I think it's a decent scenario. I think it's a pretty good option for a newer keeper. But I think the Derelict is by far the best of the freely available scenarios. It's the most atmospheric. It feels the most like a fully developed Call of Cthulhu scenario. And my group shared those sentiments. They said the Derelict was their favorite one of those, and the Derelict was one of the scenarios that we played this year that they actually liked above average. They had a really good time playing it. So I think that speaks highly to the quality of the Derelict, but it's free, so I really do encourage you to pick it up and make up your own mind about it. You can do so. at no cost, and I think that's a really great thing that Chaosium's been able to do that. And I do discuss the Derelict and the other freely made scenarios in another video I've made, basically detailing how you can play Call of Cthulhu for a couple months completely for free. And I'll include a link to that video in this video's description below. How did the scenario end up playing out for my group? Two surviving characters basically got into the Delilah's lifeboat and pushed off into the North Atlantic. It's one of the outcomes that the scenario offers, so we were staying on script, as it were, and it was a really satisfying conclusion. They are probably not going to survive in the North Atlantic in a little lifeboat, desperately hoping someone finds them before their limited food and water runs out, or their boat flips, or there's a storm or whatnot. Die of exposure. But it was very in keeping with the horror theme that this was a better option than sticking around where the Ceopod was still hunting them. So yeah, my group had a lot of fun. I'm sure most groups will as well with this one. I highly recommend the Derelict. And yeah, if you've run the Derelict, feel free to share your own experiences with it below. If you have questions about the Derelict that I haven't fully addressed, or you disagree with something I've said, agree with something I've said, feel free to share your own sentiments in the comments as well. The more comments there are, the more useful this will be for someone who's looking at running the Derelict for themselves for the first time. Hopefully this was a useful and informative video. As always, thank you for watching, and until next time, happy gaming.